Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am up. I am seeing myself being up. Perfect. Oh, Bernard Foster, not getting notifications, 10 hat on. I'm sorry, Bernard. I'm sorry. Alright, so hopefully everyone may come back. Let me check my sound, make sure sound and everything is still good. Guys, Hard Bastard was supposed to be on today. That is entirely my fault that he wasn't. I don't quite feel all that well today, not necessarily 100% anyway. And my show ended up going late with Grant Cameron, and it ended up pushing my show with Hard Bastard to Monday. So Hard Bastard would be here on Monday, and that was my fault on 2 accounts. I put both of them on the same day. I was eating my Wheaties, and things went bad. Mental note for next time, don't put 2 guests on the exact same day. So yeah, Hard Bastard will be here on Monday. That should be a damn good show. I am really looking forward to that show. It's embarrassing to cancel, meaning for me to him, not necessarily for the audience itself, just for me to him. Because I like the guy. Now I wanted him on the show. So, second of all, thanks to everyone who supports the show, whether it's through Super Cash, whether it's through PayPal, whether it's through Patreon, whether it's through looking at the videos, whether it's through liking, sharing. Even if you disliked the video and you watched it, thank you very much. I still say that's true, and I still say that's thank you. So, there was a massive walkout today. Yeah, still today. There was a massive walkout, student walkout. Thousands and thousands and thousands of students walked out protesting gun violence. Now, I read the story. I was going through the different stories, and the first time I saw the story, I didn't think too much about the story. It was just, oh, okay, nice. Bunch of students walked out for guns, and you must understand why I took it that way. It's not I'm downplaying it. It's just I'm a product of where I've been born and where I've been raised and my political climate. And guns have killed so many people. We have millions of those things running through the country. And I think to myself, it is natural as natural can be to believe that a violent culture that's ensconced in guns and liquor would end up killing themselves over and over and again and repeatedly. Even if you have 1 tiny % of people with bad intentions in the country, you're still going to get murders. So I don't get shocked by murders, large or small. I'm never shocked by them. I assume that those things are going to take place. I look at it and say, well, you have a country that's ensconced in guns. Well, yeah, people are going to use the guns they're ensconced in. Even if the overwhelming majority of the population are good-hearted people. And if that's true, why do you have guns in the first place? But assuming they're not, if you have a small number, just a small number, say they're not starting off as bad, say it's stress, say it's economic hardship, say it's something that's in the society itself, the pressures of the society itself, the I want to get more than you have society that we have. You're going to get them. It's like the very act that you have them, and the very act that you have that particular pressure in your society, you have a horrendously difficult society that you're ensconced in. There is zero to little safety net in this country. People function on this idea of getting more is somehow always the most, the intent, the purpose. You're going to get murders. You're going to get killings. Let alone the people who might be a little awful, screw loose. Those things are going to take place. The violence in our movies, the violence in our music, the violence in our video games, the violence. Your culture is the issue. Your culture is the issue. The culture produced those guns. Those guns are going to be used. You glorify them. You put them in the Second Amendment. People can walk around with guns, a thing that can take the life of somebody else. Just walking around willy-nilly, as if nothing is taking place, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. You can buy a gun before you can vote, if I am not mistaken. Come on. Come on. I'm just saying. I'm cynical because I consider it's expected. It's expected. I'm not shocked by it. There's a school shooting. That's horrendous. I'm not shocked by it. There's a shooting somewhere else. It's horrendous. I'm not shocked by it. We have multiple shootings every day. Every day. I'm not shocked by it. This is one of the most violent countries in the world, especially if you're talking about Western countries. You're not talking about a war zone. So, no, I'm not shocked by this stuff. So when students are marching, I have to say to myself, I understand, but I'm not shocked by the violence. As I was looking through additional stories, I was in a relaxed mode, and in those relaxed modes, I've said before that there are times where I get a little bit more closer to my heart center, where I'm not necessarily processing this through this kind of intellectual lens, where I'm just looking at stories and so forth. And I thought to myself, during the civil rights movement and during these other movements, those people could have said the same thing. Like, at some point, those people went out and they marched. They bitched, they moaned, they protested, they wanted something to change. If I'm looking at this through a historical lens, let's say 20, 30 years into the future, what does this particular moment look like with these kids coming out en masse saying, we're sick of this? Enough. Enough. Fix it. Now, one of the people who was there in that march was Bernie Sanders. And Sanders is like 70-something years old. I haven't seen any other article showing anyone else went. And they loved him. And he's giving that speech, telling him, I am proud of you, with what you guys are doing. Fact is, and I'm saying this for myself, not for Sanders, the last generation has let this generation down. And this generation has let this coming up generation down. And those kids, in this moment of being pissed off, this is their way of saying, you people are fuck-ups. That other generation that has allowed this society to prosper the way it's prospered, you people are fuck-ups. You've sold us out. And I felt the same way about the previous generation. You sold us out. $50,000 to go to school. You realize those kids that are marching, when they finally get to the point of going to college, they're going to find that their parents have allowed a situation where they are going to be screwed out of $500,000 or $50,000. They're going to have debt on their backs for the next 30, 40 years if they want to get an education. That's what their parents and their grandparents has done in their interests. Those kids have been screwed. The generation before those kids were being screwed. I'm talking about my generation. They've sold us down the river. Now those kids have gotten to the point of saying, enough on this one specific issue. Enough. Fix it. Fix it. And they've walked out for it. Apparently, some of those kids were being reprimanded for doing so. Those kids say, fuck it, and they did it anyway. They said enough. Let's take a look at Sanders. Let's see. This is the Hill. All right, that doesn't appear to be sound. That being said, that's Bernie Sanders. He's with a mob of kids. They love that he's there. Senator Bernie Sanders addressed the crowd of students on Wednesday participating in a national walkout to protest gun violence. Speaking through the megaphone outside the Capitol, Sanders commended the students for leading the nation in the right direction and opposing the National Rifle Association. We are very proud of what you're doing, the former presidential candidate said. You and young people of this country are leading the nation. All across the country, people are sick and tired of gun violence, and it's time that all of us to stand together up to the NRA and to pass common sense gun legislation, Sanders added. The group, made up of hundreds of students, had just a fraction of what's estimated thousands worldwide who walked out of their schools to march. Moments of silence or protests to mark the 1 month of the shooting of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, which left 17 dead. In the weeks since the shooting, students have intensified their calls for Congress to pass stricter gun and school safety laws. Yeah, whatever I want to think. The march itself, I like. I just hope they don't stop there. Because like I said, their parents have failed them on this. Their parents have utterly failed them. And yeah, they're not necessarily crazy for saying we want common sense gun legislation. At least I don't think they're crazy for it. And I like the fact that they're being proactive to do so. It's a good job on the students. I didn't necessarily want to let the story go by without flagging it again. Everyone watch Explaining Guns and Cats on YouTube. That's funny. Burns should say, don't be pussies like your parents. Don't be pussies like your parents. You know, the part is, man, if they were, you have to wonder what happens if students get more politically engaged because of what's going on. And not just getting politically engaged, bugging the shit out of their parents, going on these marches, going on these protests. You can radicalize, I guess, an element of the population based on what's going on. And that's not necessarily a bad radicalization. Part of the reason we failed them is because debt's peonage. I mean, those kids, their parents are working a job more likely than not. That job is being used to supply the resources that they need. If anything happens to that particular job, those people are going to lose the ability to pay for their resources. Assume for the moment those parents protest. Let's say they walk out. Let's say they get arrested, for that matter. Will they lose their job if they get arrested? Do they have vacation time to take off in order to strike in the first place? Do they strike without their vacation time? What if they lose their job in the process? Will they have the capacity to pay for their kids? All of this stuff boils down to a certain amount of debt peonage that prevents the person, structurally prevents the person from doing anything. Those kids, however, are not bound by those. Yes, they're bound by rules from the standpoint of college or from the standpoint of their school. But it pinpoints that there's a larger reality that we function in. There are things that are more important than your job. There are things that are more important than your school. That's kind of, I think, why I like this story. The students pull themselves out of their normal context. Not going to class for books, not going to lunchroom, not talking about Susie and Joe or whatever. They're saying to themselves, we are on a ball hurling through the cosmos. We exist. This desk exists. Other people exist. And those other people are being taken out. Yes, they want us to go to school, but what's more important? The fact that those other people have been taken out of my school books. What's more important? The fact that other people have been taken out of my job. I guess I'm trying to make this point. There's a larger reality to things. There are things that are more important than them going to their school or to their books. In this case, they wanted to put a measure or put a pin in that. We're marching because of what took place and something needs to be done for it. Now, the question becomes, is there a way to hold these people accountable? Because if there's not a way to hold these people accountable, they're going to ignore what you just did. Again, my cynicism in this is not what they're doing. It's not that they don't necessarily have an effect or impact. It's none of that. I guess I'll look at politics as, unless they feel that they're under threat, nothing takes place. These guys are bribed actors. Whatever they're telling them in school, these guys are bribed actors. They lean towards the direction of cash. You need some mechanism, some measure to pull them in your direction. Numbers can do so. These marches, yes, they're nice, but you need something else. It's like you need they need to believe that these marches are enough to make them lose. Yeah, they need to believe that these marches are enough to make them lose. Now, on one part, Democrats partially go your way because that doesn't adversely affect their donors. So you may have one of the parties. That's the reason why Democrats are always harping about the NRA. That doesn't in any way affect their donors. They can be unabashed against the NRA to some degree. It depends on the Democrat, of course. But all in all, I like this. I like this. I like the symbolism anyway. I like the symbolism. And yeah, for that matter, West Virginia teachers went on a strike. There's another group, I think it's in Kentucky, that's thinking about going on a strike. I honestly wish all of these people start going hand in hand. How can I say this? We're united. Like, it's all of these things are the same. I know people like to look at and divvy themselves up. But for all intents and purposes, the things that people are complaining about are related to one another. There may be differences in regards to identity. There may be differences in regards to gender and race and all this other stuff. But for all intents and purposes, the thing that really matters is issues of class. That's what matters. You can hate me and all this other stuff. At the end of the day, don't fuck me in the voting polls. And if the person we support, don't fuck me over. And I won't fuck you over. And we can work together hand in hand from the standpoint of class. I think that's more important. I think it's more important. I can't change how you look at me from the standpoint of identity. From the standpoint of class, we're in the same boat. Let's focus on the things to which we agree. In this case, we agree that we're in the same boat. Let's do it from that direction. When I say that all of these people, whether you're in West Virginia, whether you're in Kentucky, whether you're in these students, all of us are in the same boat. All of us, for all intents and purposes, are in similar or the same class. That should be articulated. That's all. I think it's a big deal. When one person decides to strike, I think everybody should be in a certain amount of solidarity with that group. I think those groups need to be in solidarity and in association with each other, including the party apparatus. Nick Brownell's People's Party should be, in association with the people in West Virginia. I guess I'm saying there needs to be something that would allow everybody in the United States, from the standpoint of workers, to unite with one another. That either creates a party or at the very least creates this kind of mass union or mass organization or mass group. That's what I would love. I would love for that to take place. TuneIt 20. Jamal, all the latest Hollywood movies are pushing anti-Russian propaganda. Just watch Red Swan. American CIA can do no wrong, and Russia bad guys that look like Putin brainwashing people. Hitman, Bodyguard, Equalizer. Are you serious? That sucks. Yeah, that sucks. But this is kind of my point. Ash experiment. The Ash experiment. You get everybody screaming the exact same thing and get the other people, the outliers, to fall in line with the propaganda. Yeah, of course it's going to leak into video games. Yeah. It's like Hollywood has a reverb effect on that stuff. Quote from JFK, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Remain armed Americans. I see what you mean. Don't get rid of guns, because at some point you may need to use those guns to take back your country. I guess that's my point, man. If that's where we are, and by the way, I never said get rid of guns. And I'm not saying that you said I said it. I never said get rid of guns. The issue with guns, I think, goes beyond guns. That's all. I don't think it's straightforward. If only Debbie came here and talked to Jamal again. Rainbow Blue. No, not again. Not again. I let her get her point across. At least on that one. I mean, she can come on. I don't care if she comes on. But I don't need to have a conversation about Parkland with her again. We disagree. I agree, class war is a real problem. All these movements are to keep us divided. Yeah, agreed. Agreed. And the division is somewhat shallow. Like, look, the reason I'm not hard on the people should talk this way, people should sound this way, people should say this thing, people. I am not hard on those things, because I think those things are shallow distinctions. There are going to be people say things that are greatly disliked. There will be. It's just a part of being a human being, a part of being a person. I can't control the things that those people say. I can't even control all the things those people think, per se. But if there are areas where we end up on where it's, how can I say this? I care more about people being able to have their life, which means I lean more towards the economic side of the stuff. If someone hates my guts, believe me to my devices, fair enough. I can live with that. I can live with that. I can't live with that if the politics is this kind of identity-driven politics of sorts. I can live with that if economically I'm intact, somebody else is intact, the other person intact. I don't need you to accept me as long as I can live my life the way I need to live my life. I can't force you to like me. So it's like I can't force somebody to talk a particular way or act a particular way. I'm not even going to try. What's the point? Allow people to live the life that they want to live. All things being equal, if I try to force somebody to behave a particular way, there's going to be a force that goes against that particular force. It's like there's no way out in this. The only way out is just to be. Leave people to their devices. Like there's, like for example, in the 60s movement, for the most part, was necessary. You had this situation where the American public was rabidly racist in the way they were going about their affairs and the way they were going about their nation. And they had laws and regulations, public policies, cultures, all those things led to that particular behavior. The U.S. government taking the disposition that that's no longer acceptable is great. That works. That should be the normal way of being in the first place. And we're not necessarily at a point where everything is equal, everything is fair. I have no particular belief that that's the case at all. My case is, once you've reached somewhat of a level of interaction with one another that's somewhat, I guess, relatively equal, at the very least it should be or supposed to be, then it gets a little different. It's not, it's hard to say this. It's like everything goes on a spectrum. And because everything goes on a spectrum, once that spectrum moves, you're still going to have people on the edges of the spectrum. So, yes, you get to this place where there's somewhat of a balance. And then you have people who want to go beyond the balance. So it's not just, you know, don't call people really racist things. It's, well, you shouldn't even call people things that aren't really racist, but leans towards a particular way. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's use sexism, for example. I was in an argument back and forth with some very insane people. And I said, I was like, that woman was acting hysterical. And she was like, oh my God, he used the term hysterical. He's being sexist. It's like, no, I'm describing the accurate behavior of the way you're acting. Now, you're not being sexist for using a word, particularly if the word fits. But there will be some people who say using that word inherently, just even using a word is sexist. I think those people are nuts. Fact is, that goes for everything that's on somewhat of a spectrum. Like, if you're talking about somebody being sexist, racist, homophobic, xenophobe, whatever, that stuff literally runs on a spectrum. And you end up in a subjective area where there are certain areas that get somewhat subjective based on the personality or the consciousness that's applying or looking at it. I don't feel the need to fight those battles. This is a lot of wood to chop to say I don't feel the need to fight those particular battles. Let people have to say. I can disagree. There will be time when we bump heads. Don't get me wrong. And yeah, I may take shots at the person for saying certain things and all that stuff. But ultimately, if it's something that we agree on, then we agree on that particular point. Let's fight for that particular thing that we agree. I don't need to browbeat people to talk the way I need them to talk. That's all. That's all. I know that sounds, like I said, that's a lot of wood to chop. But it's true. I find these people bumping heads over things. Or it's like, that person said this and it hurt this person's feelings. I acknowledge that person's feelings were hurt. I'm not downplaying it. I understand. My feelings are not engaged. I try to keep my feelings out, at least of those type of things. Don't get me wrong. I still get annoyed. I still get pissed off. You'll still hear me lose my shit at something. I'm a person. I'm a person. I do the exact same thing. My goal, however, is not to do that. If that makes sense. It's like there's a goal, there's an intellectual goal, but there's the person, the human element that's like, that motherfucker's in this. We'll see. Let's see. Bernard Foster. The argument to hold guns in order to revolt against the government with F-22 Raptors, nukes, bunk busters is stupid, but for personal protection and hunting are rational. Now, I feel you. It's like they have the Potbelly helicopter. It's like, what is that little gun going to do against a Potbelly helicopter? Yeah, that argument makes sense when everyone has muskets. Everyone has muskets. I understand personal protection. Rifles I don't quite get unless you're just in a particular area where they're using those rifles in those areas and they're leaving those rifles in those areas. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I know what you mean. Like the argument for we need to fight back against the government with their bunket buster, you know, rifles and missiles and everything else. I understand that. Fair enough. Personal protection, I understand that. Yeah, I mix. Look, I lean a lot on the libertarian side, and I know this sounds strange. Like I guess I'm further to the left than most, but my further to the left goes into this idea of I want to be left to my devices. Because I want to be left to my devices, I don't want big brother government hovering over me on this way. What I do want the government to provide is to make sure everyone has the things that they need beyond having the things they need, leave them to their devices. This comes with this idea of technical solutions to certain issues that tries to eliminate labor, where the person is not spending the entirety of their life doing labor. They can have these wider perspective of things. They can look towards this idea of space and the idea of growth and human development. My feeling is guns is somewhat of doesn't fit into that, but the idea is that guns get weeded out just based on people feeling they don't need those things as the society grows and progresses. I guess my feeling is outlawing guns doesn't really get rid of guns. I guess that's my feeling on it, or that's my thought on it. Even if you outlaw guns, people are still going to have their hands on guns. And how do you exclude 200 million guns from the country at this point? And is excluding guns similar to excluding drugs, where you just make a black market for those things? I don't know the answer to those questions, which makes me somewhat sketchy about this idea of banning guns as outright. And the second point, I understand this idea of personal protection for guns. So yeah, I get that. That's why I'm not necessarily on the bandwagon of let's just ban guns, because I don't know if that necessarily fixes the issue of the gun issue. But do something, yes. Do something. Fuck yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think people need rifles on the street. I don't think they need rocket launchers on the street. The moment you make the answer of saying, should people be able to carry rocket launchers? The moment you say no, then you say, all right, you've set the standard that there are some things that human beings shouldn't be walking around with as personal protection or personal armaments. Where do we pull that level back to? Now, some people will say rifles. Some people will say handguns. I don't know where I end up on that. Probably handguns. But if you want to end up in a certain location, fair enough. And certainly not equipped with 30 rounds. And like, there are areas where you pull that shit back. Definitely pull it back. So, let's see. What we got? Somebody say, this is exactly, Jamal. Leave me alone. Leave me to my devices. Yeah. What if someone lobbying bombs on a unicycle? Disarm everyone, just not me, Bob Romero. So right. Right, libertarian. Take everybody's weapons. I want to keep mine, though. I want to keep mine, just in case. Yeah, Bob. That's fucking hilarious. Samurai swords. Everybody walking around with samurai swords. I was talking to a Brit one day. We were in Bahrain. We were in Bahrain, in a Bahrainian airport. And he said, you guys have guns. It's fucking is ridiculous. Why do you have guns in the way that you guys have guns? And he said in Britain there was a mass shooting. They just took everybody's guns and the mass shootings went away. And I was like, how do you do that? You have a gun culture. You have a culture like steeped in a cultural idea of guns. I said, not to mention that culture in that way. You have like 200 million, 300 million guns. We have just as many guns as we have people. How do you get rid of that many guns? Not let alone how do you get rid of that many guns? You have this massive sized country. You have borders on Canada, Mexico, with a coast. I mean, California, Virginia. How do you do that? And he's like, yeah, I guess I can see that could be an issue. And I was like, and not to mention, getting rid of guns is not getting rid of your issue. Getting rid of guns is just to stop it from massively happening. Like, if you get rid of guns, yes, you can't necessarily have this mass shooting, but you got mass stabbings. The mass stabbings kills less people, yes, but what was the cause of the mass stabbing in the first place? Like, the issue of causing the shootings themselves is not necessarily the guns. The guns just make it worse. Like, it's like, what's the thing? What's that thing that's in human society itself? It's not the person. It's the society itself that's breeding a particular behavior in the person. What is that thing that's doing that? That's what you want to get at. That's the thing that everyone pays no attention to. They assume that it's just the human being himself flipping out. Yes, but why? Why? Why is the person flipping out that way? What's the driver? They ignore the driver. That's too difficult to figure out. That's too difficult to solve. They just focus on how can we minimize the damage from whatever is causing that particular behavior. It would be nice at one point if we get to a society where we actually look at what is the driver of that behavior. And are we going to really do anything about the driver of that behavior? So, human beings don't function just magically. I live in Oakland, and these type of people running around with guns everywhere makes me nervous. You have no idea what their state of mind is. Jeremy Chase, I agree with you, man. It's bizarre. It really is bizarre. Like, when I was in Israel, and we were walking around, and there would be people walking around with these huge weapons, and you're looking at them like, wow, that person could flip out in a heartbeat. He's not. My thought is always they're not rap type. That's my thought. It's like if you need to walk around with a gun to that degree, you're either magnificently terrified, you're extraordinarily terrified. Like, it has to be. There's no other reason you will walk around with a gun like that. You're magnificently terrified. It's like you're a pussy at heart, and you're walking around with this gun to boost yourself up. It's a self-image and a masculinity problem. You need something to augment yourself. Yeah, the state of mind, I think, is weird. It's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. White Out Jamal, if Progressive Voices joins the walkout, he's going to have a lot of free time on his hands. He might come calling. I'm curious if he joined the walkout. If he did, kudos. If he did, good for him. If he did, good for him. That's so funny. Yep, there are more reasons guns in this country than people. Is that fucking normal? I don't think that's normal. No, it's not. Look at the rest of the civilized world. It isn't. Stable genius professor. No, it's not. I don't think it is either. I don't think it is either. Like, when you ask me for a political thing, I have different strains of thought on this, and it depends on the lens that I'm looking at it in. That's why I have a hard time dealing with this issue. It's like I have a hard time coming down. If we lived in a society where everyone was trustworthy and everything else, like if you if you create a society where the drivers and the incentives of the society make it a cooperative society, your need for guns will probably go away. We don't live in that society. We live in this capitalistic, dog-eat-dog, competition, I got to get mine, fuck you society. And in that particular society, everybody is singular, separate, trying to get theirs, throwing elbows. Then you can see a society where guns become more likely. Not just more likely, prized. They become prized. The incentives of that society drives your reasoning of the society itself. It's like the kernels of society, the way it's structured. It makes the gun thing more likely. It makes the creation of guns more likely. It makes the use of guns more likely. It's like, how do you take guns away from a society where it becomes likely to have guns? And even if it's not guns, is it going to be something else? Yes, it's going to be something else. It's going to be a knife. It's going to be a box cutter. It's going to be anything that they can use to put a hole or a scratch on somebody. The issue with guns is you get to do that a lot. It's a very effective tool for taking away life, which makes it all the more weirder that those life forms that can be taken away by guns allow those particular things to propagate all throughout the country and treat them as if they're toys. It's amazing. It's really weird. It's really, really weird. City dwellers have no idea. Rural America, livestock predators, firearms are necessary. Right, but we're talking about people walking around with it in the city. We're talking about people walking around in the city. I mean, think about it. You're talking about people going into a Starbucks. He's not in the middle of North Dakota fighting off bears and zebras. Like, this is literally people walking around in somewhere like Richmond, Virginia, in a coffee shop with a gun on their hip, as if they're going out in the Wild West. That's what we're talking about. Like, I don't take issue with people holding guns, you know, in the middle of the forest where they could be attacked by a bear. I am talking about, and I think most people are talking about, somebody walking into a school, walking into a church, walking into a house, and taking people's lives. That's what we're talking about. So, I'm an American in Canada and Green Party member here. People here are arguing 16 years old's rights to vote in response to school shooting. Shame on them. Shame on them. Shame on them is right. Shame on them is right. You need your kids to do your own goddamn work. Shame on them is right. You go black. America started by rebelling against the government while Australia did not. By the way, Australia relies on the United States for protection, so it's easy for them to holler than the United States to save Australia from the Japanese. No, and you're right by that. You know, it's funny. And if I'm not mistaken, I even told him, I said, this is kind of your fault, dude. He says, how is it my fault? I said, our country rebelled. Like, part of the reason that amendment is there is to rebel against the king. It's because they're experienced. In the same way I talk about this stuff from my own context, from my own experience, they wrote that document from their own experience. The Second Amendment was there because they were using to kick your ass out. They were taking their country, or they were taking the country. So you can understand that people who took a country with an armed rebellion may put in armed rebellion into that same document that creates their country. Like, it wasn't magic. They were based on their own experience in their own context. It's like, dude, it was kind of your fault. It's kind of your fault. All right, guys, I am going to end this. My energies are fading. I'm getting hungry. Yeah, good on those kids for walking out. Good on those kids for walking out. You're doing the job that your parents couldn't. So, all right, guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support through Patreon. And everybody who donated, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Bernard Foster, Tunet20. Thank you very much. Have a good one, guys.